On behalf of CAI's Great IT Professional and Waypath, we would like to welcome everyone today to our expert panel discussion on digital engagement. You don't know what you don't know, and it's costing more than you think. My name is Michael Malutis, and I am the moderator for today's discussion. I will begin today's conversation with the opening question, which is, and any of you can take this away, can field this to get things started, which is who specifically owns the digital strategy in an organization?
Well, as a marketing person, I'm going to say marketing owns the digital strategy, but there's a reason for that. You have to understand what digital is. It's really broad, and it's a tool that helps to implement the strategic objectives of a company. So when you're looking at your digital strategy and the pieces of it, you have to look at who really handles those pieces to see who really owns it. I mean, it's a strategic objective of the company, but it's really broad, from website to outbound email to podcasts to webcasts like this to SEO, Google AdWords. There's a whole range of elements that comprise a digital strategy, and someone needs to really orchestrate that completely. And at times, with partnering with their IT, their CTO, the CIO, the CISO, to make sure that everything is really running smoothly.
And what I've seen as well, so marketing is a lot of times where that'll sit. I've seen organizations where marketing is either fragmented. There is no centralized marketing. It's fragmented among various business units. There is no central control. Sometimes in those cases, you'll actually have a chief digital officer. That is becoming a more common role. A lot of times marketing will own it. For some where marketing is either fragmented or marketing is not really a thing, like regulated utilities, it can even sit within a customer experience group or corporate communications. So that's another place that we've seen that sit. And I think I echo what Paula said. Even if you find one group who owns it, it has to be a collaborative effort, because nearly everyone in the organization is a stakeholder when it comes to digital, not just the IT folks, but everyone else around it.
Those are great answers. And I was gonna, jump to the second one there that you've got, Michael, where there's the tug of war. I know that Paula and we met at a CMS conference, and we were talking about this very subject about, you can declare an owner, but as Jeff mentioned, there's multiple stakeholders, and some might think they own it, and some might think that they should have more say and do some things that the other folks either may want. So marketing may want something, IT may say you can't have that or get in line. So what's that tug of war like, Paula?
So that's a legitimate tug of war. I've been at companies in situations where we know we need a certain tool in marketing, and we're presented options by the IT group that have all the latest bells and whistles, but the reality is they're expensive, they're difficult to implement, no one knows how to use them, and they really don't satisfy what the objective is, and you have to really look at that closely. I do believe that anytime you embark on any kind of platform, whether it's Dynamics, Sitecore, anything you're working on, you need to partner with your IT team. You need to know what is compatible with other systems and platforms and servers in the company. You certainly can't just go out there and do anything you want to do. And then feel comfortable that everyone's looking at it from the same way. You definitely can't have security dictating what website platform you're going to use, or what host you're going to use. You need to all get together in the same room and pull it together. That said, we like in marketing to keep IT a little bit at arm's distance. We want to kind of control the flow and bring them in when we need them. We don't want them kind of going off on their own either.
And I think in the best cases that I've seen, it's less of a tug of war, and maybe we'll call it a healthy tension. between them, and I think that's good, right? So I think there's a collaborative aspect to it that definitely has to be there, but I think challenging each other is ultimately leads to tougher questions, and I think tougher questions lead to better answers. And it sorts out why these different things are important to these different groups, because they do have, let's not call them competing priorities, but different priorities, right? And the best way that I've heard it from IT, what IT should be in an ideal world, is changing it from the Department of Know, N-O, to the Department of Know, K-N-O-W. So IT's job should be not dictating what marketing can and can't do, but educating marketing on the reasons why we have these standards, or the reasons why this platform might be a good fit from an IT perspective, but also understanding that the functional requirements and ultimately the business, I mean, most of the time the business is paying for it in some way, right? They're going to pay for it somehow or another. So they should be able to get a lot of what they want. And again, I think, there is you're apt to kind of keep them at arm's length because you don't want to hear the answer, the no, the NO. But I do think that the earlier you get involved and the more there is that collaborative aspect, the more you know, right? And so I think that ends up being a better thing. Now there's organizational politics and culture plays a huge role in that, right? So there's certainly dysfunctional organizations where that utopian dream is not going to be realized, and in those cases, that's a whole different set of things. But I think the best collaborations that we've seen between them, there is still that healthy tension, but I think it ultimately makes for a better product. And from the technology side, which is more where I'm coming from, that's where I like to partner with our marketing folks and the other business stakeholders.
So Jeff, there's one other group that we have to take into consideration, and that's the leadership or the management team. Frequently, they really have no idea what any of us are talking about in terms of what the platforms are and what they could do, but they think they get it. And obviously, the purse strings are with them, and budgets can get convoluted when you don't have a leadership team that truly understands what's in it for them and why you want to do something the way you do it. So, you from a marketing perspective, you almost have to work backwards. I'm going to set everything up so I give them what they want to look at so they can figure out how to run their business, and then we'll make it work within the system that we're looking at. And we know that we could do that. Like, for instance, dashboarding, start early, don't do it at the end, build everything in, and make a lot of friends. But the leadership teams frequently have ideas about what they want to do. Like if they're hell-bent on SEO or Google AdWords, you're going to have to look in a different direction and figure out what it is you're going to do and really make it work so that everybody's happy and satisfied.
And Paula, from your perspective in that leadership area, are they more likely to land on things like Google AdWords and SEO as like a thing, or does it matter more to them the dollars behind it, right? And what Google AdWords and SEO mean from a bottom line perspective, where if you show the ROI, they might think those fancy things, get on the fancy keywords, but at the end of the day, it's dollars and cents to them.
Yeah.
Right, unless the keyword is their name, then they're really happy. There's no limit to what you can spend against someone's name. But they're
right.
things.
You hit it on the head, Paul. You took the words out of my mouth with respect to the purse strings. I think that's massive. Somebody at the end of the day has to pay for it in some shape or form, whether you're maintaining it internally, using an organization like ours to support you, the time that it's going to take to get the foundation set and keep going. And those underlying costs are not always looked at, and they hear the buzzwords. They went to a trade show, they said, hey, we need this because this big company made $1 million from it in their case study that they showed, and that's great. But now we have to get down to the day-to-day activities of doing that. I also appreciated what you said about the dashboards or showing them some stuff. I have a story near and dear to my heart about my father-in-law who wasn't a formally educated businessman, but ran a successful one-man electrician shop for a while. And he said I would always go in and hang the chandelier first, and then I'd wire the house, because when they saw the chandelier, they said, okay, you did something today, because they couldn't see what was going on behind the walls. And so he'd make sure that turned on. So I think that some of that stuff is important. I think that's internal political savvy of the person who's trying to get something done, and they know which buttons to press, and hopefully they're close to that person who has the purse strings too.
I also think having the right partner to support you, and IT always has partners, and marketing tends to be a little more sheepish about partners, but having a partner that can answer the questions and be your personal guide to what you're doing is incredibly important, and really liking the people that you're partnering with. We could not, in my last job, have had a Dynamics implementation twice, a revamp, and website 3 times, if we didn't like the people that we worked with and trust them and know that they were there to support our team. And our team was not just marketing, it was marketing and IT, but it almost took the burden off of IT to know, oh, marketing's got their person out there that's guiding them, but we don't have to worry about it. So the partner is incredibly important.
Yeah, I think when IT can provide the overall guidance and structure, in my experience, they've been very happy to have someone else provide the expertise, right? Because it's not something where they want to really, they've got so many other things going on. I mean, you think about IT to run a large organization, and I mean, to them, sometimes this is the last thing they want to worry about. They're worrying about, like, you know, pipes going into data centers. They're worrying about the phone system staying up, and email, and like the things that you need to conduct business on a day-to-day basis. The accounting systems, they're worried about the ERPs. Like they've got a lot going on. So the more you can take off their plate, it's if you can come with that solution already there, hey, look, we've got the platform, we've got the partner, we're ready to go, sign off, help us through that. I think that can make a big difference to, getting to yes with an IT department.
Totally agree.
I want to move on to another question. By the way, I have some of my own questions, but I'll, if we have time, this is a very interesting discussion. Being somebody who's been in marketing for so long, I find this very interesting. It certainly cuts right to some of the challenges that I've faced over my career. Next question, though, what would you say some of the most common customer complaints are of the websites of organizations? In other words, what are organizations doing wrong with their websites as perceived by their users or by their customers?
We hear, marketing always hears what's wrong about anyone's website from the leadership team. It's too slow. It doesn't have current content. I can't find anything. Too many clicks to get someplace. 404 errors, something, dead links that aren't 404 errors. Somebody else has this on their site. Somebody else has that on their site. Why can't we do that? Oh, I could go on and on and on. You get these complaints typically from your management team if they're on it and something's not quite right. And then no matter what platform you use, every so often something won't work on it. And there's no reason for that. No one ever knows why something that worked perfectly well on a Monday is broken on a Tuesday. And that's the day that your COO goes on the website and finds that error, right? It happens all the time.
I think on my top list were a lot of the same ones that Paula had. I think one that's like an insidious one that you actually don't hear as many complaints about, but it's the silent one, is accessibility. And you don't hear about the complaints because people sometimes they can't complain. They can't get to the site or get to the thing where they're going to complain. I mean, it's estimated that up to 20% and maybe even more for certain industries like healthcare of traffic might be coming from people with some sort of disability. And that could impact their ability to view or to transact with your site. And so, the fact that there's not an accessible site, there's no excuse in 2021 for having a site that's not accessible, that's not following WCAG standards. But the sad fact is that sites are still getting built today without that. It's not just historical sites. Sites are being built today without that lens and with excluding it. It's an inclusion issue. It's, you know, a larger issue, societal issue, but it's certainly a technology issue. I also like the ones where it's the executives looking at it. You know, sometimes it's like the executive still has a BlackBerry or some other device that like you never built the site for, that was never designed to work on it. And it's like, well, why doesn't it work on this? And it's like, well, because you're the only one still using it. But it's, you know, how much time do we spend to fix like that one executive's experience? Sometimes you do, because it is that executive and you rely on them for the money.
Yeah, I thought your list was quite comprehensive, Paula. The competition is a big one all the time. Oh, those guys are doing it. How come you can't do it? And, you know, we've had some last minute requests all of a sudden. By next week, can you do what they have over there? Because we need something just like that, especially with a hot button, whether it's diversity, the environment, you know, translation to Spanish, or having something work like that. So we've had some of those things. The other one, you know, sitting on the sales side is, hey, it's not driving enough business our way. So where's all those people that are supposed to come here and ask us to take their money? And that's doesn't always happen. And so the attribution to the marketing side and the investment gets under question sometimes. You know, they say, you know, you asked us to do all this stuff. It's going to help us drive some business. Where's the money?
Right.
Yeah. And the lack of quality leads, right? That's something else that we hear is like, you can generate leads on the site, but are those actually quality leads? And part of that goes into how are you actually tracking the lead through the process? Can you actually go back, like you said, attribution? Can you attribute new business to that original lead? And that goes into, do you have your analytics set up, and are your systems talking to each other? And that's where the customer complaints, you know, that it gets more into the internal complaints.
Right. I think it's always really important to tie your systems together. And I think with respect to leads and your CRM and getting everything speaking to each other to make it work and sing.
We have a question from the audience. Speaking of, quote, you don't know what you don't know, unquote, what are customers not complaining about that they perhaps should be complaining about because it's costing them? Interesting question.
So I think an interesting thing that has multiple dimensions now is speed. So there's a big push now, and you've gone from, you know, websites used to be super fast because they were all text and they had very little of anything else, right? It wasn't very interactive, but it would load real quick. And then they got super bloated because everybody wanted the really cool effects, and those all took a lot of bandwidth, and you know, the site slowed down. And now you're going back to this this preference for lightning fast websites. And there's more than one reason to that. It's not only a customer experience issue, it's now an SEO issue. So Google is now looking at page speed, specifically mobile page speed, as one of the factors that they're using to rank. And so it's one of those things where you could be losing out on SEO, you could be losing your search positioning because of something that you're not even thinking about. You're putting out the greatest content, right? And it's always been content is king. Put out good content and the search engines will find you. You know, that'll get you backlinks, that'll get all those things. But now you're being deprioritized because you haven't built a site that loads fast enough. So I think that's one that people don't often think about, how those things are intertwined. They might just think, oh, well, it takes an extra second to load for my user. That's not a big deal, but it could actually be costing you money.
I think the website also as part of an integrated strategy with other digital elements is important, particularly when you're looking at branded content and designed content. And when you do something for a website on a platform, you're then making another version for LinkedIn, another version for Facebook, another version for outbound emails. And that is it adds up over time, and then things slip and they're not all correctly branded or consistent. For me, something I've been looking at a lot is Headless CMS, where you develop your content separately and then it gets pushed out to the different platforms that you're looking at. So if you stay where you are now, the hidden costs are there, the upfront costs for Headless are there, but then you could get everything around the globe in every language, in every format, just pushed through consistently. So I think you really have to kind of think through the whole, where the website lands within your whole digital environment.
I think just to kind of add on to what Jeff was saying, and it kind of touches on where you're going too, is having responsive websites. So all of a sudden it's not working on the platform that you're on, whether it's your mobile phone, which is the primary one, probably the first stop for most people. If somebody sees something there and it's not rendering correctly, or if the navigation stinks and they give up and they abandon it. You heard it more in the commerce space around abandoning carts. So this is difficult. You're asking me for 1,000 things. And so there's a balance between the amount of questions, the security elements, different things that people are willing to do for speed and for efficiency.
I've actually made changes on how things responsibly move on to iPhones so that we shift and change the order on a phone so that we really look at what people are looking for. If they're on their phone, chances are they want to look at someone's bio or get their phone number. So rather than have everything else come first, we'll shift things around in order to get things in the right position for other handheld devices.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example. We've done it with a client where, a utility where if you're coming from your mobile phone, you're either trying to log in and pay your bill or report an outage, right? Because that's the biggest thing. So now suddenly when you come to the responsive version of their site, reporting an outage is like the main action. It's the thing that shows up, like, because we're having to get them to it quicker. And that goes to your thing of takes too many clicks or it takes too many taps. Right? Making people jump through too many hoops to do something. If they have a choice between you and someone else, they're going to go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Want to move on to the next question, which is, what would you say some of the most common pain points are with customers' current platforms?
I think one we hear all the time is that it's too hard to make changes. And that when we have to make a change, we have to get IT involved. IT doesn't make it a priority. They can't keep up with the pace of our business. I think we touched on another one in the previous one about how it works with your other systems, right? Does it work with the rest of your Martech stack? That's a big deal. And as you've traditionally had these big monolithic packages, right, that are bringing multiple components of that stack to bear. You have, the giant systems, digital experience platform systems like Adobe and like Sitecore, where they bring not only content management, but digital asset management, analytics, personalization and testing, campaign management, marketing automation, and they bring all these things to bear. But in reality, there are very few clients that actually go and buy that entire stack and use it all and use it the way that it's intended to be used. So that's where I think the concept that's been increasingly talked about, which is the composable digital experience platform, is really key for where we're going as an industry. And that's really that you can, it's kind of the Martech equivalent of bring your own device. That was really popular, right? This is bring your own platform. So the promise that these platforms will work together if you write them to certain specifications, if you adhere to these certain frameworks, and then you can bring in this one platform for content management. You don't have to bring all the bloat with it. You just bring the one thing that you need from that platform, and you pair it with the one thing that you like from the other one. And then you pair that with a different one, and you kind of put together the pieces, the puzzle pieces. And that used to be a really expensive integration work that you would have to do, and it's all custom every time. And so I think what you're seeing now from all the vendors is this move towards being interoperable and being, adhering to these, they call it a mock framework, which is microservices, API driven, cloud native, and headless. And Paul already touched on headless, but if they adhere to that kind of standard, then these things are all going to be kind of guaranteed to work better together. And you no longer have to go after these big, huge stacks.
I could not agree with you more. 2 points on that. One is no one ever understands how much everything costs, and that's a major pain point. You think you've got it, and then you have to be willing to do the upfront investment to make it right. The other piece that's a little bit different is the SEO components and making sure you have somebody that is really mindful of what else you have to put in order to come up in search with your meta descriptions, for instance. I've seen situations where different partners have said, oh, just leave it be. Your first line of copy will come up as your meta, which is so wrong, wrong, wrong. And to really make it work so that you've gone through all this effort, you have a beautiful website, you have incredible content, and you're not coming up in search at all. What's the problem there? And really look at the pieces of the puzzle to make it right and make your team focus on that. And that's something that IT never does. It's totally in marketing's camp. Marketing is involved in endless other projects, but someone's got to focus on it in a big way.
I want to ask a follow-up question myself, Paula, if you don't mind. But if you would, when you were talking about the SEO and keywords, with all the customers that you deal with and the clients that you've worked with, the companies you've worked with, what would you say if there was a maturity level, say of 1 through 5, 5 being the most sophisticated, 1 being the least sophisticated? Where are most companies on the SEO maturity scale right now?
I'm going to be generous and say a 2. Some companies are now bringing on, as Jeff said earlier, a digital person that's going to be mindful of that. But they're looking across all the different elements, and I don't think they're really looking specifically at SEO. And then a lot of times when you work with digital agencies, they're on it and your team's not, and you can't really check what's going on. And so companies are trusting of a lot of outside people that maybe don't know their business as well as they should. And this is something coming out of my background is corporate communications to start, marketing and communications, but mostly communications. You really need to know what people are searching for, what they're thinking about, what the keywords are, how they're getting to you, and make sure that you're looking at what your competition does. Look who comes up first. What are they saying? And revamp and change the copy and get rid of extraneous terms. Honestly, you don't have to put someone's title half the time in a meta description, just their name and the buzzword and what they do, and people will get it. They'll really get it,
I think one of the things that I see too is people mistaking SEO and for SEM, right? So the search engine marketing, people think that they can just throw some dollars at it, buy the right keywords, buy the right ads, and you get those. But I mean, the first thing I do when I get search results is I scroll past all the ads. And I'm not the only one who does that, right? So the first things that come up aren't the most relevant on Google. They're the ones that got paid for the most. And so people are savvy about that. So if you think that you can just throw money at it and do search engine marketing and then that's going to fix everything, that's not. SEO is about organic search, and it's really the more powerful search. And that's where there are techniques, there are technical things that need to be done. There's technical SEO, which is things like making sure that there are meta descriptions and making sure that your headings are in the right order. And those are all, published in different places. You can find out how to do that all from a technical perspective, but nothing substitutes for quality content, right? That's always going to be the thing that ranks you.
Right, and an optimized, clearly understood headline or title is the best thing. I once worked on cybersecurity for celebrities, and there was an article written, and they pegged celebrity cybersecurity. And my company used to come up every single time somebody put in that word because there was an article and it was right there in the headline. And when you do news releases, you optimize your headlines. You have to think the same way with SEO and organic search and everything that you're working on.
And sometimes it's harder than you think, because simple, you need to be simple, and simple is actually harder, right? Cutting words, being shorter, being more pithy. It's more difficult.
Really on target with what you had. Get to the point right away of what people want to see. And most people that will review your work in the company will make it really wordy.
Yeah. I think going for another pain point that we hear about customers' platforms, most of these platforms are still on premise and a fixed version, and upgrades are painful. They're painful for everyone. They're painful for IT. They're painful for the users, and they don't get the value out of it. These vendors are really good at now. They have great customer success managers who are going in, and every quarter they'll talk about all the new things that are in the platform and all these cool new things that you can do. And the customers are like, well, that's great, but I'm 4 versions behind and I can't even do the thing you promised me a year ago because we can't get this upgrade done. Upgrades are painful. And again, I think that's why you're increasingly seeing adoption of cloud technology, because the promise there of it's going to be upgraded, as new features are released, they're being released for you, and everything that you've done is backwards compatible. We're not introducing breaking changes. I think that's a very strong promise, and people are willing to pay a premium for that.
So why would you say, moving on to the next question, why would you say clients are seeking changes in their CMS? What would be some of the most common reasons why people are seeking to change things?
I have a theory about this, but I'm gonna before I do that, I want to let Paula and Paul talk, because I have a theory.
Paul.
I'll give you one that I'm seeing that's practical, is that they may have more than one CMS. They may have multiple platforms. They may have gone through acquisitions, different reasons, and now they're trying to centralize. So that's probably one that I see regularly. And then how about you, Paula?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, you go in, like as a CMO, you go to a new company, you look at their website and they're on WordPress, and you kind of don't want to be there. And it can't do what you want it to do. It's not nimble. It doesn't allow you to really move forward. Everything's hardwired in the site. You don't want that either. And sometimes you merge companies, and then somebody has to take the lead and integrate the other party's content or website. And sometimes you can integrate it into a platform, and sometimes you have to throw it all away and just start fresh and new. And then you have to look at the competition. If they're doing things that your platform can't do, your CMS can't do, you have no choice. You're going to have to make a change. It's just there.
Yeah, and I think all of those are true. And if you're on an obviously underpowered platform, I think there's definitely a case to be made there. I will say, I'm not going to put a number to this, but I'm going to say that maybe even more often than not, when someone wants to change their content management system, it's not about the content management system. It's not about the technology. So when we look at digital strategy and we look at it holistically, we look at 5 pillars, and technology is one of them. But you also have content, design, process, and the organization. And all 5 of those have to work well. If you don't have those, if one of those falls short, the whole thing falls down. And so what I see a lot of times is people blame the platform because the technology and the name is the most prominent thing. It's the thing that's out there. It's the thing that people log in. It's the thing they see on the splash screen when they go into the system. But maybe it's not about the technology. Maybe it's about how it was implemented. Maybe the content model wasn't done right. Maybe the business process is faulty. Maybe change management was botched when they rolled it out. And maybe people just don't like the look of the current site. Maybe the design is bad, and that has nothing to do with the platform. And none of those are going to get fixed just by moving to a different platform, because all you're doing is moving all of your problems with you. It's like if you moved houses and you just took everything with you that was in the attic. You didn't go through and cleaned it out first. And so I think that when people talk about their platform, a lot of times they feel like switching platforms is just this thing that's going to cure all their ills, and it's not. If you don't do it right, you're just setting yourself up to do it again.
It goes back to the partner that you're dealing with. We had a situation once where we realized that our partner set things up in such a strange way that it was going to cost us more money to fix it. We wanted to stay with the platform, and we changed partners and then worked our way through over a year or so to get out of the rabbit holes we were going into that were set up that way. I think that's
Paula, when you did that, was it although it was not set up optimally, I'll give you that, but was there a training issue too? Did people even know how to use it the way it was set up?
okay. My team, myself, we don't do code. We don't
Right,
do code. We do plain English. We
right.
need it easy. And right, sometimes things are done with code implied, and yeah, it made it really hard.
So you needed help to get it done, and then that person that you gave your list to, maybe you're on their back burner, and maybe they didn't do it every day, right? So,
Well, you stay on with your partner to help you keep moving forward. So you need to make it so that inside the firm, and no matter where you are, company firm, you need to be able to input and make changes on your website. And you need to have a platform that delivers to your ability to make the changes and keep it current. And that means that you don't always need the biggest, best, most sophisticated. There are elements when we implemented Sitecore, there are elements we never used, but we used other elements of Sitecore that Sitecore said, wow, you're doing this with it? We never even thought of that, you know? And so you really have to make it so that you can make the platform work for you. And I also have a personal bias toward having a partner that's within 1 to 2 hours of my time zone. I need to be able to talk to them during the working day. I don't want to send things overnight and get things in the morning and it's misunderstood and it may be cheaper, but then you're going around 2 or 3 times as opposed to just hopping on a call, looking at it together, understanding what the problem is and fixing it. And that's my personal bias.
And I think what you're describing as well is a partner who didn't understand your organization. They didn't understand the skills or who would actually be doing this, because there are some organizations where it's perfectly fine to make something code heavy because the people who are doing it are comfortable in that way, and you have to do it because the requirements dictate, that's the way it's done. So without understanding the full context, without understanding all of those different pillars, you end up designing something that might be the right solution for a different organization, but it's not
Right.
for yours.
Good point.
I do want to get to our final question, but again, I have my own question here. I want to just sort of bring up for the panel, because a lot of what you're talking about seems to come back to being able to get executive or leadership buy-in for investments that are going to be made in some way. And I have been in marketing for a long time, for most of my career. And there's that old joke, I know that half of my budget is marketing budget works. I just don't know which half. We've always struggled with this. Which is, how do you tie these marketing investments when you're making the case to executive leadership? How do you tie marketing investments to revenue when it is such a murky? It's not a science. I mean, it seems much more of an art. There's so much that's going on in the atmosphere, especially with anything that you're doing from a marketing perspective. It's really hard to trace revenue back to any one thing. So how are you going to make that argument to executive leadership when you're trying to tie marketing investments to revenue? I'm sorry for surprising everybody and throwing that out there, but it is a question I legitimately have.
It's a real question. Paula, do you think it's an art or a science?
It's a little bit of both. And you
Right.
have to glob onto anything you have to show a result. So for instance, if you have an info on the website, marketing needs to be in control of that email box to see how many people in the comments say, I was on your website and I
Right.
want to know more about this. And really track not so much the business, but the leads. You have to crawl before you walk. And if people are going in and asking questions, it's really important to pull that out and keep track of it. You also have to keep track with HR and people interviewing because candidates will come in and say, I loved your website. It was so easy to find what I wanted to see. Now, granted, they're probably just going into the HR part of the site, but maybe not. But you have to keep track of that in your own way and keep a list, because you'll be able to play it back in ways that management will understand. They're going to say, well, did it turn into business? And then you want to integrate it in with your CRM and your pipeline, your opportunities, and you want to see how it worked out. And it's probably not going to work out. I mean, it's just, some things are meant to be art or advertising, and some things are science and lead gen. And you need the advertising. You need to be in the game. You need your name to be there. So when someone's looking for something, your name's there. They may not go to you, but your name needs to be there to keep you alive.
So Paula, come budget season, CEO says, hey, Paula, we gave you $2 million last year. How about 1 million this year? And you need to do some of this stuff and go back in. What does your attribution look like?
What does my attribution look like? You pull out, for instance, in my last firm, we had a marketing summit once a year where we analyzed everything.
Right.
It was a major PowerPoint presentation. We looked at reads of articles. We looked at where the leads were coming from. Was it coming from LinkedIn, Twitter, organically to the website? We looked at participation on webinars. We looked at where the people came from. We looked at every bit of data that we had in order to prove what we're doing is valuable. And listen, they're still going to cut it sometimes.
They will. And yeah, and and where I was going with that, I wanted to hear some of the things Paul threw out there, but what you heard was a combination of attribution. Somebody did not buy from you today because you had a great website or some super awesome content, or they attended one webinar. It's the conversation starter, and then there's maybe 3 or 4 other touches that are attributed to it. And that's where I like what you talked about with the integration with the CRM, constantly measuring that and capturing that. I love the thing you said about human resources. In fact, I had this conversation with our HR director about people coming to our website, having an interview and saying, I think I would fit in this culture, because they could feel the culture from the website. So
Right.
that was an interesting comment as well.
The notion of touch points in BD is incredibly important, and to have the ability to have your CRM set up so that you're really tracking with each content, every contact, everything they've ever gotten. And that's where things like HubSpot are really interesting, where you integrate everything in, and you could, like, for instance, you'll have a Wall Street Journal reporter and you sent them a client alert. And then you go in and you could see what other specific articles that Wall Street Journal reporter, because they're in your CRM, what else they looked at, and to really, study that and see where people are going and what you could do with that data.
Yeah, and I think that's where, the rise of first-party data and customer data platforms is really going to help you tie all those things in, because it's not just about your website, right? It's about all of the interactions that customer has with you across all the different touch points, and you need to be able to capture all of those from various places and get those all into a single view of the customer with one customer data platform. And so that's a key component in the digital experience platform is the CDP.
Well, thank you for that great answer to my question. I'm more than satisfied. I think we're ready for our final question here. It's been a great discussion so far, which is how does a customer know where to draw the line between keeping their current platform and selecting a new platform?
I will say that line is not bright. A lot of times that can be also something of an art and a science together. I think there are hard numbers you can look at to help you. So we talked about doing some of the justification for marketing budget, but the cost benefit analysis, it can be hard, especially if you're not doing checkouts and there's not a direct tie to revenue. to quantify some of those things, but it is doable. You can find ways to to quantify the impact of the platform on your business and figuring out what the cost of that is going to be. I think a key decision that has to be made is it a re-platform or is it a re-implementation? Is it actually the platform that's costing you money, or is it that the implementation needs to be changed? And that could be that it was right at the time, but then your business model has changed, or you've gone through mergers and now it's different. So maybe it was right at the beginning, but now it's not. And so you have to think of all of those things, because the cost of switching is real, right? There is a cost, and the cost of switching can be hidden too. People tend to look at it as just, well, this is what I'm going to pay for the software, and this is what I'm going to pay for the implementation, and there's my external spend. But it's not just that. It's the inefficiencies that you create by going to a new process, right? It's the change management that you have to introduce in order to do it. It's the enhancements that you're going to spend in year 2 and 3. It's the training for the new people. It's potentially the staffing that you have to do. And are you doing a new model of insourcing versus outsourcing? So there are all these different factors that have to be considered, I think, when you're talking about, is this a new platform? Is this a re-implementation on the current platform? But I think you can ultimately get to numbers, and I think the numbers can be used to guide the conversation, but do not determine the outcome.
Jeff, do you ever think that there's a size element when an organization gets to a certain size, or is that irrelevant? Or what kind of volume metric might push someone over the edge?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. It's, if you're on any of the top tier platforms, I think a lot of those can end up working for almost any organization, depending on how you implement it, right? There are preferences and there's compatibility with other systems. So there might be technical requirements that kind of do it. But I think any size organization can work on that. I mean, we talked about WordPress, and WordPress would certainly not be my preference for a lot of our clients for a platform, but there are big clients out there who are able to successfully run their site on WordPress. It won't fit a lot of the use cases, but it can fit some of their use cases. So I think size could be one determining factor in that, but I don't think it's the only one.
And Paul, you mentioned merger activity and changes in the organization. So if suddenly, you were 8 offices and now you're 28 offices around the world, and you have considerations where the websites need to be measurably different in different places, yet still have the branding, yet still be in languages, yet still be actionable wherever you are with common information that goes in, I think that would push somebody not to do a re-implementation, which I think is more of what most people, I think, Jeff, they really do re-implementations more often than not, I think. But sometimes you just need a platform that can enable you to do what you have to do for your company, because your company has changed in stature in some way.
Yeah, there are certainly key differences amongst the platforms. They do things differently, right? Even if they all do multilingual, they do them in a different way. If they all do multi-site, they do them in a different way. And some of those may fit your organization and some of them may not. And so that's a key consideration. When we go through selection processes for our clients, we come up with these things that we call differentiating requirements, because every platform is going to give you a WYSIWYG editor and a spell checker and all these other 700 things that you can put into an RFP and get a response for. But what's really truly unique about your business, that requirement on the platform will make or break this implementation.
Great. That was a wonderful panel discussion. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Maybe we can continue this at a future point, though. Really very dynamic. I learned a lot. On behalf of Waypath, the team at Waypath, and Paula and CAI's great IT professional, we do hope to see all of you again at future events. Thank you so much, Paul, Jeff, and Paula. It's been a great session.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.